Check out the end of the video, our international giveaway, till July 31st. Today on the Slanted Lens, I want to take a look at camera diffusion. I shot through the late 80s and 90s, and you could not shoot with enough diffusion on the camera. It was impossible to add diffusion later, and it had to be done in camera. You had to make a decision, and when you made that decision, you had to live with it. Today, we live in an era of sharpness. Well, we've hit the point where it's so sharp that it's difficult for retouchers to get a really nice image because they've got to take all that sharpness out and clean up the skin and things in the image. The trend now, I think, is shifting towards a little softer image in camera that later you don't have to do so much work on. I started looking around at NAB to see what kind of diffusion was out there. Tiffen, that used to have these 4-inch glass filters in the black satin, satin, and pearl, has now offered a 52 to 82 millimeter screw-in filters, ideal for DSLR users because you can just screw these onto the end of your lens. Tiffen is not our sponsor. I just think this is a great product that's been offered on the market. I asked them if we could review it. They sent me the filters so I could review them. I just think it's a product you ought to look into. Let's take a look at some diffusion basics. One, diffusion basically blooms the highlights or lets the highlights kind of bleed into the shadow areas. That's how you can tell if something is diffused as you look at that kind of diffusion as it moves from the highlights into the shadows. It's also on a long millimeter lens, like a 200 millimeter, you need more diffusion on that to make it look the same as on a, say, 24 millimeter. It doesn't need near as much diffusion to look as diffused. So longer lenses need more to look as heavy as a wider angle lens. So that's two. Number three is that you lose a little bit of contrast. You'll see it start to blur into the face. So let's take a look at these three different sets of filters. First, let's look at how we lit our set, and then we'll get started from there. I set up a black and white set to show the difference in each filter. I want to have black areas that the whites can bleed into. So this black and white set is going to emphasize the comparison and going to make it a lot easier for us to see. I also took the filters outside and used them in natural light situation that was only lit with a single reflector. This is more of a real-life comparison. We're going to take a look at how they react in that scenario as well. Here's the lighting diagram for our first setup. I'm going to use a beauty dish. It's a deep dish mold beauty dish. It's painted white inside. We had two large PhotoFlex softboxes acting as rim lights. These two softboxes were placed just behind the set, so the set wall itself is going to act as a flag, keeping the light off from the front of the wall. We used two medium softboxes aimed at the white squares, one high and one low. Those were acting just as our background light. This is our first image with absolutely no diffusion. Tiffen makes satin filters and black satin filters. So let's start off first with our black satins. They produce a grainier, warmer feeling. This gives a really nice smooth look to skin. It's going to smooth out blemishes and wrinkles. This gives just a little more of a soft look to textured surfaces, but it's going to add a mild glow to the highlights. So here's the black satin 1. Here's the black satin 2. Here's the black satin 3. All the qualities that I talked about become a little more noticeable as we increase the intensity. Now let's go to the satin filters. They're going to produce a cleaner, muted kind of diffusion. They also give a nice smooth look of the skin. That's why you're going to use them. So let's take a look at the satin 1. Here's the satin 2. Here's the satin 3. Now let's take a look at Tiffen's pearlescent filters. These bloom more in the highlights than the other filters. Tiffen calls this a halo glow. They're going to reduce the sharpness and contrast while really maintaining the focus. They're great to mute colors if you want more of a pastel look, especially when you get to the pearlescent 2. It just gives a very nice glow to the image. Here's the pearlescent 1/2. Here's the pearlescent 1, or the pearl 1. Here's the pearl 2. That pearl 2 really blooms across the image. You kind of see a reduction in that contrast. You kind of see that nice white look to the image as all those highlights bloom. I love the look of the pearl 1/2. It softens the face, gives a little bloom to the highlights, but it's very subtle. That's actually my favorite. Let's take a look at how each of these filters affect a face outside in natural light. This scene is lit with just a PhotoFlex silver gold reflector. I picked a nice dark foliage background and shot at 170 millimeters just like I did the inside. You know, longer lenses need more diffusion to show. A wide angle lens is going to need much less diffusion to look the same as a long lens. So you may use a 1/2 pearl on a wide angle lens, but go to a 1 with a longer lens. Here's our image alone with absolutely no filtration. Now here's the pearl 1/2. Here's the pearl 1. Here's the pearl 2. So again, the Pearl series is stronger, gives a softer white glow over the image. I still love that Pearl 1/2. It's a great look. It gives us a little bit of bloom to the highlights, but just so subtle. Here's the Satin 1 outside in that comparison. Here's the Satin 2 outside in that comparison. And here's our Satin 3. It's a very nice look with this long lens and smooths out a lot of those freckles on her face. Just a nice look. Now let's take a look at that black satin. Remember, it's going to be a little warmer, a little more grainy, but let's take a look at the black satin 1. Here's the look at the black satin 2. And here's our black satin 3. The black satin's a little more gritty, a little more grainy, but you know, it's pretty hard to see. Each of these filters is useful for different situations. You know, for me, when I've got a scene in front of me, I'll pull the filters out and just start looking at each one of them, taking a frame and seeing which one I like the most. Sometimes the color is going to affect them. Sometimes it's the contrast that's going to affect them. So you use them for different reasons. You can stack them sometimes if you want to get really fun and crazy with them. If I'm a shooter who's shooting a lot of senior portraits and things like that, I would use a really light diffusion on my camera, and that would take off the edge of blemishes, a little bit of the issues I'm trying to retouch and work on later. Would really help my workflow in the end. From a creative standpoint, you use them to create a look, to give it a vintage look, to give it a surreal look, to give it a dreamy look. Whatever you choose, look at the diffusion material and you can make a decision on what works best for you. So get out there, experiment with some diffusion, keep those cameras rolling, keep on clicking. Here's our international giveaway, a light blaster and a Neo trigger. International giveaway till July 31st. Go to theslantedlens.com.